speak to this bill and to share my time with the member for Davenport. Mr. Speaker, I wanted to speak to this bill because, to me, this bill has a very personal connection to me personally and a personal connection to, I think, a lot of the people in my community of Etobicoke Centre. My grandfather immigrated to Canada in the late 40s, and he immigrated post-World War II from Germany. And at that time, when he came, he applied to come to Canada. He applied because he knew, or he had heard, that jobs were available here, that there was an opportunity for him to build a life for himself and his family. And in fact, he came by himself and spent 2 years living here before my grandmother was able to join him with her children and my mother. When he was applying, they asked a number of questions, and some of the questions that my grandfather told me that they asked him were some pretty basic things. They asked things like, can you work? Are you healthy? Are you strong? Can you do manual labor? Those are the kinds of questions that were being asked at the time. And when my grandfather came, sure enough, he applied those skills. He applied that willingness to work, that motivation, to some very, very labor-intensive work. He worked for Ontario Hydro, building some of the hydro power lines that we have in our province. He eventually was able to get a job at Canada Post and worked for Canada Post for many years before retiring. The reason I think this story is important is because he, like so many immigrants, came to this country believing that there was opportunity here, knowing that there was opportunity here. And Canada facilitated that opportunity by making sure that they were attracting the kinds of people that Canada needed to make this country great. We need to continue to do that, Mr. Speaker. And I think that what this bill does is it helps to ensure that we will continue to do that. We, of course, need the help of our federal partners, the federal government, but I think it takes important steps to make sure that we can do a better job of doing that. Since my grandfather's days of immigrating to Canada, the global economy has changed. The nature of the global economy, the nature of the labor market has changed. It has become more global. Today, when I think of the immigrants of today, I think about, recently I met someone who's working as a doctor for my GP, and who came to Canada from the Soviet Union, who had full qualifications, medical qualifications, and who spent a tremendous number of years and effort trying to gain medical qualification here in Ontario. Initially, when she came, she thought that process would be much easier. And unfortunately, it took her many, many years. After discovering, the unfortunate part is that she discovered this only upon arriving to Canada. I think about some of the yeah, exactly, and that's the problem, exactly, as the minister's saying, that people come to Canada thinking that they'll have that job, just like my grandfather thought he would have that job. My grandfather got that job. The immigrants of today deserve the same. I think about once in a while, when I take a taxi to events in my community, for example, I meet drivers who are qualified in many different fields, who came to Canada thinking they'd be able to work in that field, and now they can't. We need to do better by those folks, Mr. Speaker. They come here to build this country, and they deserve better, and we deserve better. And making sure that immigrants to our country come to Canada knowing what to expect will not only ensure that they live a better quality of life, and that in itself is a good reason to take these steps, Mr. Speaker, but it also ensures that we all live a better quality of life. So when I think about our economy, we have shortages. Yes, we have unemployment, and we need to tackle those issues, but we also have a lot of companies, small businesses that are looking for workers in skilled fields, and we're not able to fill those vacancies. There are a lot of folks from around the world who could help us do that, and we need to help make sure that happens. So we all benefit from this. So I think there's a couple things in this bill that I'd like to highlight that I think are important. One is that we are going to be able to, through this legislation, to accelerate the recognition of credentials for folks who are applying. That's going to allow people who are being accepted to know faster that they've been accepted, and those folks who aren't going to be accepted to work in their fields to be declined more quickly, so that they have the information before them to make a decision as to whether they want to come or not. That's the first thing. The second thing is provisions have been put into this bill to clamp down on fraud. There are so many people who come to this country with great hope, with great optimism, and unfortunately, in some cases, are made promises by folks about services that they'll be offered to help them settle here, about jobs that they'll get when they come here. And that never comes to fruition, Mr. Speaker. And so this bill will allow the government to institute fines. It'll allow us to, it'll allow criminal charges to be imposed on folks who abuse that trust, and I think that that's critically important. So that people applying to Canada, applying to come to Ontario, will have faith that they will be treated as they should. And I think the last thing I would just mention quickly, Mr. Speaker, is that all of this, what we need to make sure is that our federal government is working with us on this. That Ontario understands the local economy, we understand the local conditions here and what the labour market demands are. It's really important that the federal government partner with us to make sure that we can better meet the demands of the labour market here. When my grandfather came to Canada, the system that recognized his credentials, the system that recognized his experience, what he could bring to Canada, was there to ensure that it matched the labour market needs of today. We need to do well by those people applying to Canada today, just as we did by my grandfather. Let's make sure that we attract the folks, we give folks the information that they need to know whether they'll be able to work in their chosen field or not. We're going to accelerate that process, Mr. Speaker, and we're going to work with our federal partners to make sure that we do well by those people who want to come to Canada and help build this country and make it better, and those people who want to come to Canada to help build this country to make it better for all of us in all 107 ridings around this province. So I think this is an important bill. It takes important steps to make sure we accelerate the recognition of credentials, that we clamp down on fraud, and that we work even more effectively with our federal partners to make sure that we attract the kinds of folks who can build this country and do well by them, Mr. Speaker, and I hope we can enjoy the support of members from across the aisle as well. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.